Hey, it's Drybear. Beginning questions on what the best characters to pick up in Zenless Zone Zero are. So let's go through a full tier list, S all the way down to the bottom of all the characters that exist in ZZZ as of right now. Now I'm gonna rank this list on an individual basis based on how powerful or useful that character is. I have a separate video, a beginner's guide going over the mechanics in Zenless Zone Zero. So if you don't know how chain attacks work, how combos work, assists work, how you're supposed to build up days to stun, I recommend checking that video out. And I've also done a full video going over the best team comps in the game, which is a complete put together team of full synergies, additional abilities activated, and combos that work together between the teams themselves. So check that one out if you want full team comps. This one's going to be about the individual characters themselves. And these videos are great for these kind of games because if you're wondering who to invest in, who to keep on your team or on your roster that might be good for you, or if you get a drop, you can decide whether it's worth it for you or not. So let's jump into the list. The first one is going to be Soldier 11. She is a fire element agent, and she is also a main damage dealer. She is incredibly strong at dealing single target damage, and she does best when you have someone in her team that activates her additional ability to get even more fire damage. She pairs really well with characters like Lucy and or Koleda. So I'm gonna put the Soldier 11 in A rank just because the character that's in S rank right now kind of puts everyone else to shame, but there's a good reason for that. And for DPS wise, if you get Soldier 11 as your main DPS, she's excellent. She's really, really awesome. Great damage dealer. My recommended comp for her is going to be Koleda for your stun, and then put Lucy in there for your support as well. So those are going to be great options for you to get that fire team going. But as a damage dealer, she's close to the top, very strong, and she will carry you for a good while in Zenless Zone Zero. Next is Soukaku. She is a support character, an ice character, and she works great with Ellen, the current limited banner, and any other ice character like Lycaon that you'll have in there. And I'm also going to put her in A rank as well. She has a buff that she transfers to other people in the party. When you finish her flag banner, you put it down, you transfer that off and swap. You'll get a buff for whatever character that comes next, which is awesome. She has decent days for a support character, lots of control, and she also has some nice transitions and good defense on herself, which means that she can stay on the field and eat some attacks, and she has a good assist as well that allows you to fight some of the more aggressive bosses on top of that. For support, I would use her along with Ellen as your main DPS. Lycaon is an excellent stun character. He is easily one of the best stun characters in the game, probably tied or maybe even slightly better than the other best stun character in the game. And I'm going to put him in A rank just next to Soukaku, and possibly even up here above Soldier 11, just because the stun value he brings is so incredibly high. He's great with charge characters like Corin. If you wanted to use Corin, he's great with her as well as a DPS. He also works excellent with Ellen, so he can be the stun character for Ellen, and I put him in A rank. He lasts a long time, very good damage, and easily one of the best stun characters in the game. You can swap to him, do a quick rotation, stun the enemy, trigger a chain attack, trigger some bonuses, trigger some buffs, and then switch back to your main DPS and burst out that way. Next is Lucy, and she's actually kind of hard to rank. I'm going to put her in B, but I would say she's probably in between B and A. She is a support character. She is currently the best support character for Soldier 11 because she is fire and you can trigger that as well. And her boars have some really, like, she summons these boars. She has some really interesting interactions with some encounters, and it's possible that down the line we'll discover new techs with her that she can use her minion summon for, but it's very easy to get her buffs online. She gets the extra blockage, which is great for like ranged attacks with her boars, and she's fire, which is an excellent pickup for either using with Koleda or using with Soldier 11 as your main DPS, but she's not quite as good as Soukaku as a support, just because Soukaku in general will do more damage, and the buff that you get from Soukaku you can keep up all the time and is very easy to manage. Next is Corin. This is the character that they gave to us for free, and I'm going to put her in the C tier. She is basically a buzzsaw build from Charge Blade in Monster Hunter World, where you're just doing damage that way. She has a pizza cutter that she can use. Now, her damage is probably about B level. The reason I'm putting her down in C is because her damage is harder to access than most of the other damage dealers in the game for two main reasons. Her additional ability gets bonus damage when the target is stunned, which means you really get the most effectiveness out of Corin when you're attacking a stunned target, which means her uptime suffers for it. And on top of that, a lot of her attacks and combos are charge up attacks, which means she's going to be standing there holding the chainsaw up and buzzsawing them for a long period of time, which means that if you ever have to quick dodge or parry or assist or parry swap to their character, or you trigger a chain attack where you swap off of her. Every time you swap off of Corin, you're losing a little bit of DPS because she needs to be standing there holding her chainsaw the whole time. So if you wanted to full commit to Corin, you could run her with Lycaon as the stun to get lots of stun ups for her as well. And you can even run Soukaku to try and get some bonus on the charges there as well. But her damage, like I said, is about B level. It's just harder, a little more awkward to access, but she is free. You should get this in your mail as one of your free characters. Next up is Rina, and she is an awesome support. She is so good at support. The only downside with Rina is she is just infinitely better paired with electric agents than she is with anyone else, but she does provide some passive penetration, which is useful for everyone. She just is so good at dealing with triggering static and shock and doing electric. She is so good at that. So for support, I'm actually going to put her possibly in between here. I wouldn't put her above Lycaon for usefulness, but because she is support and she's flexible, she's kind of around where Soldier 11 is. And if you run her with an electric DPS, like either with Grace as your main DPS or Anton as your main DPS, are great options to run with Rina as support, just because she makes them infinitely better. Like if you get Anton and your 5-star role from the beginner banner is Rina, that's your comp. Run like Anby as your stun, or Grace as your stun, or Koleda as your stun, or Lycaon as your stun, whoever you want to put on there. Great options there, but Rina takes shock damage to the absolute limit. She's an amazing support character. Next is the most broken character in the game. She's actually just ridiculously overpowered and super strong, but she happens to be the limited banner character, and that is the shark girl Ellen. And she's the reason why every character listed here in A is in A and not S, is because she is absolutely just busted. This is pretty much standard practice for gacha RPGs, where the limited banner character is just ridiculously strong, and Ellen fits into that category. She has high mobility with her dash skill. She has tons of application of ice. She scales unbelievably well with Soukaku, because Soukaku gives her a damage buff and an ice damage buff that stack together, plus tons of stun, and you get trigger into her. Her assists are amazing. Her chain attacks are amazing. Half of her combos and attacks have a vortex portion, like a mechanic on them, that suck enemies in and pile them up. So when you have adds or groups of enemies, very good. She's just nuts broken. So if you can get Ellen, she's the best DPS in the game right now by a long shot. The A's in here, like Soldier 11, are just like a little bit below her, but noticeably. Like it's very obvious that Soldier 11 is an A DPS just because Ellen exists and no other reason. For Ellen comp, the best comp for her is going to be full ice. So you run Ellen with Lycaon for stun and Soukaku for your support, and that gives you the best combo you can, and you activate all of their additional abilities. In fact, I'm convinced that this comp is probably the best comp in the game right now as far as efficacy wise. I don't know if there's any comp in a game that even comes close to how good these three characters are in playing in a party together. Next up is Koleda, and I honestly, it's hard to rank her because it depends on what you're using her for. She's anywhere from B to A to S. I'm actually going to go ahead and put her around here for A. The reason being is that she's kind of on par with Lycaon for stun. Like, she actually has the fastest stun rotation in the game. So you can switch to her in a couple seconds. You can trigger a stun on an enemy. The amount of days that this girl puts out is actually bonkers. It's ridiculous. She can just jump on the field, drop a couple bombs with her hammer, blow them up, they get stunned, you trigger a chain attack, and you go straight back to your DPS. It's amazing. She also has great DPS. She works really well with Soldier 11 because she's also fire, so you can put her in there. You can put in Ben with her as well if you want to put that in. So she's an awesome option, and she works with basically anyone. Putting the additional abilities aside, if you needed a stun character that just does stunning for chain attacks, putting her in any party she'd fit, aside from additional abilities, getting those activated. Best comp for her would be Soldier 11 with Koleda, and then I would put support as Lucy, an excellent comp. That's probably the second or third best comp in the game. Under the Ellen comp is that fire comp with Soldier 11 at the forefront. Next up is the bear, Ben. This guy is in a really weird spot. He's just very odd. He's kind of in between a support and stun. He doesn't do as much days as like an Anby would, or a Koleda or a Lycaon for stun, and he doesn't have as much support as like a Soukaku or a Rina or a Lucy or even a Nicole, so he's kind of in between there. He has some really interesting usages, so you can pair him with Koleda and Soldier 11. Like, you'd actually run him as support or stun if you wanted to. He has a really amazing defensive assist, so if you quick swap to him when an enemy has that yellow attack and you get the defensive assist with him, it's awesome. He can eat some of the most dangerous attacks in the game if you do defensive assist with him. Not many characters can do that, but is it worth the loss in days or buff? He does give a defense buff. He gives a little bit of a shield, which can be useful. His movement speed's kind of slow, so moving around in the fight's kind of annoying, and he's kind of just in this weird, awkward spot overall. Now, if I'm putting him somewhere, I would put him probably in between C and B for the ranks. I think if you use him to his fullest in either like a Bellabog team or a Fire team, and you really know how to use him, he's probably the bottom of B. But if you just go for a traditional comp, which is main DPS, stun, and a support, he's kind of on the higher end of C in that area there. He can be useful, and if you have characters like if you had Soldier 11 and he's the only fire character that you have, that's a great way to activate her additional ability just because you have the fire there. You do get him free as part of one of the events as well as an option there, but it's hard to fit a defensive scaling character into these kits because you don't get as much offense coming out of him. Up next is Anton, and Anton is actually pretty beast. Anton is an electric carry main DPS. He is a 4-star or an A rank, so he's not quite as powerful as some of the 5-star or S ranks that we have on here. By himself, he's about probably low end of B, high end of C DPS. However, if you pair him with Rina, his DPS goes up to about the top end of B, maybe even the low part of A. He has amazing damage and synergy, especially if he has Rina in his party or Grace in his party or both. Very strong. He is a melee damage dealer for electric, and if you can trigger the shock, there's probably also some good disorder builds you can run with him, which is a disorder build when you run 2 elements at once. So when you trigger both status effects, you get a disorder proc. He's really great at dealing with those kind of teams, but we don't really know the extent of how strong multi-element teams can be just yet because we haven't messed with it too much. So for location, I'm going to put him just below Lucy in B. Just because Lucy is support, she has a lot of utility she brings to the team. Anton is a great damage dealer for a 4-star in A rank if you don't have other options and you don't want to run with some of the free characters. He's also pretty easy to get, and he is right up on the limited banner right now, so you might have an Anton waiting for you around. And again, if you get Rina, Anton's value goes up. Pairing those two together is an excellent choice. It's super nice. Next is Anby. She is one of the free characters that you get. She is one of the only stun characters in the game. So we have Koleda and Lycaon as the best stun characters in the game. They do incredible damage and a ton of days. That builds up really fast, and you can get stuns out of that. And Anby is kind of like your free version of those. She is also electric, so if you wanted to run, Anton, Anby with Rina, that would be a great electric team. And she has good amount of stun to fit in almost any comp, and she's very straightforward as well. And for that reason, I'm actually going to put her in B just above Anton. Anton has great damage, but I would say that the stun is really nice. And if you don't have the other stun characters in the game, you're kind of forced to use Anby. So her usefulness is pretty universal in that case. Even if you don't activate her additional ability, you still get a bunch of value from her because she'll be able to fill that stun slot. She swaps in and out fast. She has great assist swaps for parrying and countering, which is really nice. And her chain attacks are decent too. Next up is Grace, and she is, interestingly enough, she is mostly a damage dealer. She's kind of like a primary damage dealer, so she's very similar to like Soldier 11 quality. So if you wanted an electric version of Soldier 11, that would be Grace. However, she has some properties because of how shock works and how electric works that she could run in the stun role as well. And one of the comps you can run with her is you can actually run her as the stun for Anton with Rina. Like you can run Anton DPS, Grace as the synergy or the stun, and then Rina as the support, but only in that case just because you're relying so much on the shock and the status effect coming from shock. But as a main damage dealer, I love running her as a main damage dealer because she just does a bunch of flips, grenades, explosions, super fun to flip around with. And because of that, I'm going to put her just like around the same level as Soldier 11. Possibly, like if you're very fast and you're good at landing your assists, she probably slightly outperforms Soldier 11. But I would say that for the average player, because she takes a little bit more work and better positioning, we'll put her about the same level there. But for for static, she's actually amazing. For this build here, you can run her with Anby as her stun, and then you can run with Rina as her support, and you'll have an excellent party full of shot going off all the place, tons of stuns, and lots of damage. Next up is Nekomata. She is a physical main damage dealer, and she is probably the weirdest character to put into a team comp right now, because unlike Soldier 11 that needs to have fire activation plus some other swaps, or Ellen who really scales insane with other ice, Nekomata doesn't really have any needed partners. She's just an army of one. She does everything great. All of her damage is great. Her physical and assault scaling is great. Her triggers are great. And she doesn't really need anybody. Her damage overall is very strong. And I would probably put her around here in A, maybe slightly above Grace, just because she's so much easier to use. Now, you still have the additional ability trigger, like you want to run her with a physical or with one of the hairs, the cunning hairs, because it triggers there. But actually, one of her best teams is just the free characters. So run Nekomata with Anby as stun, and then run Nicole as support. End of the day, that's it. And you can actually spend a lot of time on her when you're playing her, because again, she doesn't really need anyone to buff her. She doesn't need anyone to set her up. She doesn't have any requirements or restrictions. She's just a great damage dealer that is easy to use and easy to play, very fast, excellent uses across the board. So she's probably similar to like a Soldier 11 or a Grace, not quite as strong as Ellen, but still up there, and you can run her with free characters, and she's still pretty much as good as you'd expect. Next up is Billy, the free character, and unfortunately, I'm going to put him around the level of Corin. Physical damage dealer, just like Corin. Free, you get him right off the bat as part of your core kit, and he doesn't really have many restrictions at all. He's kind of like a he's basically like a weaker overall version of Nekomata. Not that many requirements. You want to trigger assault with him, but he can trigger it himself, and you're probably going to run assault with him or a physical with him anyways. He does have some requirements where you want to stand still in place, and his assist swap is an evasive one, so you'll have to dodge away from an enemy and then shoot them, but he does have some nice follow-ups as well, and his on-field time isn't too bad either. Damage-wise, he's kind of towards the bottom here. I would say Corin and Billy are probably about the same. The only problem is Corin requires more stuns and more setup, whereas Billy kind of just goes on his own. But DPS wise, like, you can just run Billy again with Anby and then Nicole, and you'll have a perfect time dealing with that. A very easy, all those characters are free right off the bat. You can invest in them and you'll do just fine. Next up is Nicole. She is the last support in this list that we haven't talked about. So we had Rina, Soukaku as excellent supports, Lucy as slightly worse but still very good, and Nicole is the free version of that support character, and she is noticeably worse than the others here. I'm actually going to put her at the very top of C just for her usefulness. She has Ether, and it's possible that once we get Ether Gamer Girl, I'm not going to rate the upcoming characters in this list, but once we get Ether Gamer Girl, it's possible Nicole's value goes up a little bit. She also has a global defense down debuff on the enemy as part of her swap mechanic, which is really good. That can be generally applied to everyone, but it's nowhere near as good as the amount of damage increase you'll get from Soukaku's buffs, and especially if you're on an electric team, it's nowhere near as good as Rina's going to provide for you as well, nor is it the amount of damage or activation or bonuses you'll get from Lucy either. So having Nicole as part of your support team is really good. Like, you have no other options. Even if you have those, getting Nicole in there, she has good ether damage, good control, some nice vortex abilities to suck enemies in, so pretty decent there, but she is one of the free characters and is not quite as useful as some of the others. Then lastly, for the last character we haven't covered, I'm not going to cover it because you can't play these anyways, and these two characters aren't out right now, and that is going to be Piper. Now, I'll be honest, Piper I have tested the least, or theory crafted the least on, but I would put her just below Anton in main carry DPS. She's kind of like a better version of, like a better melee version of Billy. She does the physical damage. She actually builds up assault really well. There's probably an option for a double physical DPS swap with a stun support build you could run with both Billy and Piper, just kind of getting that, or maybe Nekomata and Piper, but I haven't experimented too much with those kind of like unique niche brand new theory crafted style teams. She works as a main DPS character. She does good damage, she scales really well, and if you can support her with the right team, I think she's an excellent addition to the game. So just around Anton's level, though she doesn't have a Rina, right? So like where Anton sits without Rina is about where Piper is, but if you pair Rina with Anton, then he very quickly outscales, he moves up to like the top of B, maybe even the bottom of A, if you have Rina online as part of his team. And she doesn't really have a support that does that for her. She just kind of benefits from the bonuses you'd get from some of the other supports in the game. And that's all the characters that exist in ZZZ right now and where I'd put them individually. Again, I have a video going over the team comps as well and the mechanics in the game as well. So check those out on the channel. If you have questions, drop them down below. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people. And don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.